Well, here we are, Labor Day weekend. Means different things to different people, I imagine. For some people, it means, let's head to the shore. For kids, it probably means, school can't be far away. I have a sister who taught for about 36 years, and she used to talk about how a certain point in August would come, and she would just get this feeling in her stomach. I don't know if the teachers that are here, if you experienced anything similar, but when I was a kid in school, I thought it was only us kids that felt that way, but I guess teachers do too. When September rolls around, Labor Day can mean school is coming. Labor Day for many is kind of the mark that means the end of summer. And for some, the fashion conscious, I guess, after Labor Day, you can't wear white anymore. Although I think we've loosened up on that. Where did this come from? You know, I got curious, so I do what we do when we don't know something. We get on the computer, right, and Google it. Labor Day, where'd that come from? It goes back to 1882. September 5th was a Tuesday, and it was started by the Central Labor Union in New York City. And over the next few years, it kind of grew in popularity for the whole country, and it was decided that it would become the first Monday in September as a way of recognizing the spirit of the working person. And back then, it was pretty much the spirit of the working man, since that's who mostly was working. To celebrate the spirit, the hard work of people by giving them a day off, a day of rest. Not unlike what the Bible would affirm, that we need a day of rest. You know, the commandments, the 10 commandments, the top 10, the 10 biggies, the day of rest made it in there. So it must be pretty important to keep a Sabbath, to honor the Sabbath. That is to rest and to not just lay around, but to honor God in our rest, and to recognize that in resting, we're honoring God. But we're human beings, and we live in 2014, and most of us like to go, go, go. We've got to-do lists. We've got reminders on our cell phone that tell us, oh, don't forget to do this. So maybe that's why God gave us this day of rest, because he knows what we're like, because he created us, he designed us, and knows that we, like automobiles, if we go and go and go and go and go and we never pull over for servicing, we run out of gas and our engine breaks down. And so he says, honor the Sabbath. Take a day, set it aside, and rest. Because as much as your work may be meaningful and have purpose in your life, it is not your God. I am your God, he says. And your work is a gift from me. And that's kind of what I'm hearing in the book of Ecclesiastes, this crazy book of the Bible that some of us struggle to understand. I say crazy because some people read this book and say, all he says is life is meaningless. How depressing. But you have to read the whole thing to understand that he's an observer of life. And he sounds like he's lived for a long time, and he's watched a lot of people, and he's in touch with his own life. And he's saying, you know, if work is all you got, then you don't have all you need, because your work days will end. Hear what he says again in those opening verses that Truett read. So I hated life, because the work that's done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it's meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for, that I had worked for under the sun, because I must leave them to the one who comes after me, and who knows whether he'll be a wise man or a fool. He's lived long enough to say, you know what? I work all my life. I accumulate stuff from what I've earned, and then I die and somebody else gets it. How unfair is that? And I don't even know if the person who's going to inherit it is going to know what to do with it. Life stinks. Translation, a little loose. It reminds me of a story. In fact, Truett told a story about 2 weeks ago that was similar to this. I was reading about this gentleman who had a friend. This woman was, in her 90s. I'm careful about using the word old because old is a very subjective term. And the older I get, the more I'm learning that. She was in her 90s, but I think we can say she was pretty old. And anyway, she was an amazing woman. She traveled the world during her lifetime. She collected all kinds of things from her travels, postcards, little knickknacks and mementos and things, Well, she passed away, and he was charged with being the executor of her estate, taking care of her affairs. So he had the unenviable task of going into her home and kind of clearing out her home as he took care of her affairs. So he's in her house, and he's got to deal with all this stuff. So he's got, all these big, those leaf bags we put our leaves in, trash bags, and he's putting his stuff in trash bags, and he's taking it to the dumpster. And with each trip to the dumpster, he's saying to himself, man, one day I'm going to die, and somebody's going to go through my place, through my drawers and my shelves, and they're going to clean out my stuff. And what are they going to do with it? It's probably going to go in the dumpster unless somebody in the family wants it. So we spend our lives working, earning, buying, accumulating, and then we exit this world, and it's somebody else's problem. Somebody else gets all that stuff, and we don't even know what they'll do with it. That's kind of what he's saying. And so I hear him saying, work is good. He says that later in the chapter. And it's good to see it as a gift from God, but not a God in and of itself. Sometimes people can be so busy that they get kind of a high out of that, And I'll tell you what, I'll be honest with you, pastors are the worst for this. When I go to district meetings or other meetings with clergy love to brag about how busy they are. Oh yeah, last week I had 3 funerals and 6 weddings, and this week I've got to go visit 10 shut-ins, and I don't know why they do that. And I don't know if it's accurate or they're just really, really busy. But I get tired just listening to what they're saying. I think sometimes we feel we have to validate ourselves by saying how busy we are. Gosh, if I had a nickel for every time I heard the word busy being used in conversation, wow, I'd have a lot of nickels. The chapter ends with him saying, a man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too I see is from the hand of God, for without him, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. He says, I've watched life, I've looked at my own life, and what do I conclude? Work is good, it's a gift from God. When we realize, again, that it's a gift from God and not a God. And perhaps the best thing we can do is have balance in our lives. Work hard and then enjoy the simple pleasures of life, like having a good meal. My in-laws have always been big tea drinkers. And when we would go and visit them, I would always marvel how we'd have a meal, maybe at breakfast or lunch, and they would just sit drinking tea. And they drink the same brand of tea all the time. And my mother-in-law, God bless her, would always say, boy, this is a really good cup of tea. It's the same tea you always drink. But she knew the art of just sitting and enjoying that. I think sometimes we lose that. To just stop and push back from the table maybe and say, wow, this is good. This is a blessing from God. And I don't have to be running around. I don't have to be looking at my to-do list. I don't have to be accomplishing. I can just be. And sometimes when I just be, I find myself being thankful and being still and knowing that God is God in wonderful ways. And you know what? It works for me because Jesus modeled it. I want to look at Mark chapter 1 for a minute here, because in this passage, Jesus models for us this business of balance in life. Listen, you got to work hard, and especially today, the way the economy is. I'm not slighting work, work hard, but rest well. Balance. That's what I think Jesus demonstrated. In this first chapter, Jesus is with his friends, and at one point, he goes to the home of Peter's mother-in-law, and she's sick with a fever, and he heals her. And when he does that, he kind of, use that expression, opens a can of worms. I think the word kind of spreads. And now all of a sudden, everybody in the area gets wind of this Jesus guy who can heal. And then as we look at verse 32, it says, that evening, after sunset, so it's later in the day, the people brought to Jesus all the sick and demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. Are you getting the scene here now? I don't know how big this home was, but all the people got wind of this, and the whole town comes to the door. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He also drove out many demons. So here's the deal. He heals Peter's mother-in-law. The word gets out. Now there's a line outside the door. Anybody that's got a bad back, constant nosebleeds, sprained ankle, whatever it is, they're lining up because the miracle man's in town and they want to get a healing. And the demon-possessed came too. I mean, by the end of the night, can you imagine how tired Jesus must have been? Wow. Who knows how far into the night this went? Healing after healing, casting out demon after demon. I bet he was pooped. So what happens next? Verse 35, very early in the morning, this is the next morning, while it was still dark, he's an early riser, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Wow, he had a long day the day before. He needed to step aside from his labors, the work of the Father, and go off by himself and pray and rest in his relationship with the Father. Now, Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, "Everyone's looking for you." That's right, there's another line outside the door. The word crossed over into the next town, and all those people have come. And Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else, to the nearby villages, so I can preach there also. That is why I have come." This is a very interesting passage, I think, because it shows us a couple things. Jesus needed to get away. And when he got away, he didn't tell anybody. He didn't have an answering machine with a message or a secretary. He just got up before anybody else could find him. Even his friends didn't know where he was. He needed real alone time, real downtime, as we say in our current language. Didn't let anybody know where he was going. And when they finally find, you can imagine when they wake up in the morning, where's Jesus? There's a line forming already. We got to go find him. It's because of the line that Jesus went away and rested. And when the disciples say, there's a whole bunch of people here, he says, well, I got to keep moving because I'm focused on my role. And my role is to spread the good word of the Father. My role is not to be the hero, the miracle man that everybody comes and wants to get something from in that way. There'll be other healings, but his job was to keep moving and keep teaching. And so he did not surrender to the expectations of the people. Jesus followed a deeper rhythm in life, a rhythm of faith, a rhythm of health, of work and rest, maintaining a balance. A lot of times the reason why people get sick is because they're stressed. They're overworked. They're overstretched. We're worried about the demands that other people put on us, and we feel like we've got to make everybody happy. Jesus didn't worry about that. He's saying, in a sense, I know there's other people waiting there that want to get healed, but that's not part of my mission. Today, what I need to do is go on to another village and keep preaching the word. And you know, this idea of balance in life, working and resting, it's not just known to us in the Christian faith. It's known in other traditions in the world as well. In South America, they have a saying. Some of the native people there, they'll talk about walking for a day. Maybe it's to get clean water or something, and they'll stop to rest. And what they say is, we need to stop and wait for our souls to catch up to us. Interesting expression. You know, I'm so busy and I'm going at it that, you know what? I just need to stop and kind of come together. Let my heart and my mind and my soul kind of all reconnect, because I've been at it so strong and so long. The Tao Te Ching is a writing of wisdom in the Chinese culture. And one of the things it says in these wisdom writings is, well, it's a question and then an answer. And the question is, how do you make muddy water clear? And then the answer is, you let it be still. And all the stuff that's floating around in there settles out as sediment. Oh, yes, to be still. Sometimes I wonder if that isn't what was behind the Old Testament saying, be still. God saying, be still and know that I am God. Sometimes your mind and mine can be cloudy. Our lives can be just going. And God says, be still. Let the stuff floating around settle so that you can see more clearly if there's too much going on. Doing more doesn't necessarily make it better. Being busier doesn't necessarily make us more productive. Sometimes when we rest, we recoup a little in body and spirit, and then we can go on stronger than if we just kept going and going and going. Be still and know that I am God. Let the water be still. Pause and let your soul catch up to you. There's another tradition, and it's in the Jewish tradition, and it has to do with the Sabbath box. And for all of you who have been wondering why I stuck this box up here when I started, the Sabbath box, I thought this was an interesting tradition. In some Jewish homes, they have a box like this, bigger, maybe smaller, and when the Sabbath begins at sunset, someone in the family stands by the door, front door of the house, as everybody comes home from the end of their busy day. And they are invited to put in the box everything that represents their work. Maybe it's their school books, maybe it's their laptop, maybe it's their cell phone, maybe it's their iPad or car keys, whatever it is. Put it in the box and leave it there. And symbolically say, I set my work life aside now as I take Sabbath, as I rest, as I intentionally leave not just these symbolic items, but everything associated with those items in the box and put it aside. That problem at work, that person who's getting on my nerves, that kid at school that's picking on me, put it in the box and put it aside. And rest and worship God. Now, I'm not suggesting that you get a box and keep it by your door. Well, you may want to if that works for you, but you get the idea. Do you take time to rest? Do you have a designated time in your life where you are still? Have you seen the cover of your bulletin, and have you read the question that it raises about busyness? Henry David Thoreau, it is not enough to be busy, so are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about? Are we busy unto the kingdom? Or are we busy unto accumulating stuff that someone's going to get after we're gone and maybe throw in the dumpster? Do you need to slow down and let your soul catch up to you? I'm not saying don't be productive. I'm not saying be lazy at work, cut corners. I want to say to you what I think Jesus was saying in his life, modeling balance. Do the work that God has called you to do, And don't be afraid to rest. There's nothing wrong in resting and letting your soul catch up with you. Amen.